Hey guys, in this video, we'll go over the Shakatu Stash event silver store being sold by Dellus in Velia and see which items are worth it to buy. This is an in-game event running from December 1st to December 12th in BDO. All this event is an NPC in Velia called Dellus who sells a wide range of items for a lot of silver. Some of these items are actually pretty decent for the silver cost, while others are a bit overpriced. This event is also super similar to the old Patrigo event silver shop, and we will compare some of the silver prices to the event that happened in June to see what has changed over time. But most importantly, we'll see which items are worth it to buy in this silver shop. Moving on to the most exciting part first, we're going to go over all the RNG boxes. RNG silver boxes are always my favorite thing to look at when we have these limited event shops. If you're new to this channel, the way we value RNG boxes is by getting the rates of all items in the box and multiplying that by the value of every item to get the contribution each chance of getting an item gives to the overall value of the RNG box. We then sum up all the contributions to get the real value of the RNG box, also known as the average amount of silver you can expect when opening these boxes. To see if it's worth it or not to get these RNG boxes, we just see if you get more silver on average than what it costs to buy the RNG box, along with some other data points. Some boxes don't have the explicit rates released, so we will have to use other methods to see if they're worth it to get or not. For the first two boxes, we have the Shakatu's Resplendent box and the Shakatu's Splendid box. We can see that the Shakatu's Resplendent box is being sold for only 400 million silver, while on release about 2 years ago, it was sold for 500 million silver on the Pearl store. This may seem nice at first. However, if we look at the average amount of silver you can expect, we can see that it has fallen drastically since release, down to about 357 million silver on average, using the North American server's central market pricing. This is quite unfortunate, as if the items in the box had the same value as when the box was released, this might be a really good deal. However, because accessories have deflated in price so much, this box is not really worth buying. The only time you would buy this box is if you understand that you're going to be losing silver on average, but still want a chance of getting the Splendid Stones of Destruction, Protection, or Life, as even though they are valued at 13.6 billion silver on the central market, they are worth a lot more for players who can use them. Other than that though, you are going to be spending 400 million silver for the average chance of getting 357 million silver pre-tax, which is not a really good trade. If you look at the silver after tax, you're only getting about 300 million silver. Looking at the Splendid box, this is pretty similar, as the initial sell price of this box on release was 300 million silver, and it is being sold for 240 million silver in this event shop. Unlike the other RNG silver boxes, we don't have the explicit rates of these boxes. If we assume that the price have dropped similar to how much the Resplendent box has, it would be worth about 210 million silver. Spending 240 million silver to get 210 million silver on average pre-tax is simply not a good idea. However, the same applies if you want some of the reach items in this box, then you can go for it. This may seem like a poor start, but I promise there are some better boxes coming up. Next up, we have the Shakatu Shiny Box of Life and Combat. These boxes were originally sold on the Pearl store for 100 million silver during events, and were the OG scam boxes that people talked about back in the day. I will say, since the release of these scam boxes, some items in the box have changed, like the combining of sharp black crystal shards and the decrease of amount of Kaffir stones for some boxes. However, our rates should still be pretty solid, and we have changed the values for those items. Looking at this event, 5 are being sold for 80 million each, which is less than their original price. Because of how Mano's accessories have kind of bounced back in price, and memory fragments are also back up, the Shakatu Shiny Box of Life's average silver is actually 83 million silver, which is 3 million silver more than the box's price. Now, unfortunately, after tax, it would still be around 71 million silver, but if you are willing to use most of the items in this box, then it could actually be worth it to get this RNG box. Granted, you are trading pure silver for random items and only getting a 5% increase in value if you don't sell them on the central market, but at the very least, it can be a fun box to open without losing too much silver. Now moving on to the combat box, this box has always kind of been the ugly stepchild of the two boxes, as hards and sharps were never as high valued as memory fragments and Caphras, along with crons being a lot cheaper back in the day compared to those two items. Unfortunately, even though crons have gone up in price, sharp black crystal shards are still really low, and most of the combat accessories have gone down by quite a bit. So even though it is sad to say, the Combat Shakatu Shinies box is still a lot worse at an average of 55 million silver pre-tax, and definitely not worth it to get at an 80 million silver price. Now of course, with all these boxes, since they are RNG, you could get more or less than the calculated average, but we are basing all our judgments on the average since that's most close to what people will likely get. So maybe still a little bit disappointing to some people, but to end the RNG box segment, we have the event Shakatu's Luxury Box and Mystery Box. The Luxury Box is being sold for 64 million silver, while the Mystery Box is being sold for 40 million silver. For the Shakatu's Luxury Box, you are expected to get 64.7 million silver on average pre-tax, which is slightly more than the buy price of this box. If you aren't going to be selling any of the items on the central market, it can be a neutral trade using silver for a random item. Meanwhile, the Shakatu's Mystery Box is actually the most valuable chest in this bunch, on average giving 44.7 million silver for a price of 40 million silver. This is a 10% increase pre-tax, which is better on average than any other box. Of course, post-tax you're only getting 38 million silver, so much like every other box, it's only possible to get positive silver if you do it pre-tax. For both of these boxes, you do lose less than the Resplendent and Splendid boxes, but there are no chance of getting high tier items, so it's not really that great of a box. So what is the conclusion for all these boxes? Unfortunately, they are all pretty low value in terms of average value. You can get neutral value from some of the Shakatu Shiny Box of Life, Luxury Box, and Mystery Box pre-tax, but those don't really have any chance of getting the super difficult to get items, as they are older boxes. This isn't really a reason to get those boxes, as you are still trading pure silver for a slight increase in value on average, but no chance of getting endgame items. If you have a lot of silver and are willing to lose silver on average for a chance of getting Resplendent stones or any other high value item, the Shakatu's Resplendent box and Splendid boxes are going to be the only ones worth getting. Other than that though, I would not recommend anyone who is looking to earn silver to buy any of these boxes. That being said, it is always fun to buy these boxes, and honestly, it's not that much silver being wasted, so if you just want to spice things up with a little bit of RNG, go ahead and get some of these boxes. So after all the RNG boxes, we'll move on to fail stacks. We have a 150, 120, 100, 90, 80, and 70 stacks. You can get one of each other than the 90, 80, and 70 where you can get 3. These stacks are interesting as they were sold in the Patrigo's event store in June this year for slightly more silver. Compared to that event, all stack prices have actually gone down by around 30% for most of them and 40% for the 120 and 20% for the 100 stack. This does kind of make sense because of how stacks have become easier and easier to get, but them going down in price is nice since silver is also easier to get. My opinion back then was that these prices are somewhat reasonable considering you don't have to make them yourself. To be honest, even though half a year has gone by, with the new changes in pricing, my opinion is still pretty similar. These prices will be slightly more than if you made these stacks by yourself, but for people who don't really want to deal with that and don't have an abundance of stacks, I think it would be okay to buy these stacks. Silver is just so easy to get now that this is really only an hour or two of grinding, so it's not too bad. For people who have a ton of stacks or people who are consistently making their own stacks, it's an okay item to skip, but also not too bad to get. Next up, we have the Krogdalo Horse boxes. Even though these are down from 3 billion silver to only 1.8 billion silver each, I still probably wouldn't recommend getting these. It's honestly really easy and fast to buy these from the central market for a lot cheaper than the 1.8 billion silver. However, I will say that if for some reason you're on a server that don't sell these, or it's taking a really long time to pre-order a piece, 1.8 billion silver is honestly not that much and can be okay if you just need that one piece. For most people though, I would recommend just buying these from the central market. Next up is the Mythical Censer. This item is only 2.4 billion silver now, down from 3 billion silver. My opinion back then was that even though it was a lot more than what it costs to make, skipping the time-gated mats could be worth it to some people. My reasoning was also supported by how there was once a one-time quest where you could choose between 5 censers and an all-skill dream horse, and most people chose the 5 censers even though they could sell that one dream horse for about 12 to 13 billion silver, which is about 2.4 million per censer. I will say that even though it is cheaper now at 2.4 billion silver, it's also a lot cheaper to craft these yourselves, being about 650 million silver without including the time-gated mats. The really big change is that mystical feathers are now sitting on the central market, so it's honestly not as bad as making these censers yourself as it once was. For those who want to rush T10 horses, you are still only spending 1.7 billion silver to skip about a week of RP horse catching, so that can still be worth it to a lot of people who just don't want to deal with horse catching. I will say though that for most people, this deal is definitely a lot worse than it once was, even though it's 600 million silver less. Mystical feathers are just so easy to get now. If you're okay with catching horses, then you can easily skip this item. Next up we have Garmoth's horns. They give you a young crimson dragon and falls into the same category where you can pre-order the young crimson dragons at about a third of the price and you can slowly get them over time. Garmoths are a lot easier to do, so getting the young crimson dragon is just a lot more common. The HP that the young crimson dragon gives is also only really used in PvP, so it's not the biggest item to rush. I think this is just a little bit too expensive and it's better to just slowly wait and do Garmoths and pre-order them on the central market. However, if you just have a ton of silver, then it's not that bad to get. Even though it's 20% less at 2.4 billion silver now instead of 3, it still isn't that amazing unless you really just want to rush it. Next up are boss statues for 1.6 billion silver. These are cheaper than they once were at 2 billion silver, but it's still really not going to be that worth it. I will say though, for PvE, these are completely useless as you can just get the 15 AP from house buffs. These are only really going to be useful for uncapped PvP or for decoration for your residence. If you don't want to grind them yourselves for the decoration, it can be okay, but it's just purely cosmetic and would be up to the player. For people who want the functionality of the house buff, it's simply not worth it to get. I will add that they do look pretty cool though, so do check them out if you're interested in making a residence. 1.6 billion silver is also not that bad for a big furniture piece. Next up is Kuturan's leaves, which can give you a La or Zeka helmet or armor if you get 100 of each type of leaf. You can buy 100 of each leaf for 160 million each, but that would also mean that the total helmet and outfit would cost you 32 billion silver. I personally don't think this is worth it since you will get these leaves from grinding pretty good zones that most people will eventually grind. It is also a pretty fun grind slowly getting these leaves. I would recommend against buying these, but if you refuse to grind these spots, this is basically the only other way to get this outfit other than fishing, so it's okay to pick up. It is pretty expensive in my eyes, but again, if you want the outfit, it's not that bad. Next up, we have the transformed crystals, which are completely RP, so it's up to the player whether they want to spend 80 billion silver on them or not. After that though, we have the bundle of 500 crow coins for 80 million silver, and it is kind of worth it, as you can get about 83 million silver worth of memory fragments if you trade them in once a week. On top of that, you can also get the other things in the crow coin shop. Of course, if you sell the memory fragments back to the central market, you will be losing money, but if you use them, then it's not too bad. A little bit annoying to trade them in every week, but it is positive value if you do take the time to do that. I would say if you're bothered or want the other items in the shop, then this can be an okay pickup, but also not the worst thing to skip if you're lazy. After that though, we have 5 perfume encourages for 50 million silver, and it's obviously an amazing deal as each of them sell for 30 million silver on the central market. Everyone should definitely pick this up even if you aren't going to be using them, as you can just sell them for positive silver. Even after tax, you're still getting at least 50 million silver. Next up though, we have the sturdy forest treads, and these are definitely not worth it as you can just buy them for less on the central market, and you can also get the products for a lot less. If you're on a server where they don't sell, then this can be okay, but honestly not a crucial item unless you're PvPing a lot. After that though, we have the Shakatu's decorated furniture set, which is being sold for 1.4 billion silver. This isn't the worst item. If you like the decoration, you can also look at them individually on the Pearl shop if you're interested in them. Getting pearl decorations for silver is always pretty nice, as long as you're going to be using them for your residence. Since this is mostly cosmetic, it's definitely up to the player whether they want it or not. After that though, we have 5 loot scrolls, which is definitely worth it if you're grinding. 8 million for one loot scroll is really good, and a lot of grinders are going to be running out of these, so it's pretty positive value. After the loot scrolls though, we have 100 petals for 120 million silver. If wines are sitting at max price, then this is definitely worth getting on average, as if you sell the wines for 1.62 million silver, you get 1.8 million silver per petal after tax. This is based on the average amount of wines you get per petal, and we do have another video on that if you're interested. With average luck, this would give you a gain of about 60 million silver, making this box is definitely worth it. The problem is, because of this event, wine prices may drop by a lot, especially if you're buying this later in the event, so you may have to wait a bit for them to go back in price. Of course, if you still need to reroll your fairies, then this is definitely going to be worth it. For most people though, I would recommend getting this item as you can just sell it for more silver eventually. After the petals, we have horse enhancement mat boxes, and they're worth it if you're gonna enhance a horse, as this is better silver per enhancement mat than buying it on the central market, as these enhancement mats give about double the ones on the market. If you aren't ever gonna be enhancing a dream horse, then you can skip it, but if you're ever gonna do that, then this is definitely worth it. Next up, we have Marni's fuel, which is gonna be super cheap as they're selling 10 for 16 million, and they usually go for 10 million each. If you're gonna tag your characters and don't have a huge stockpile of fuel, I would definitely recommend picking these up. You save a lot of silver in the long run. Next up after that is the life-skilling items like the Giovan Grolin, Book of Florin, and Laura's warm black teas. I would say if you're ever gonna life-skill, these are super cheap and definitely worth it to pick up. They all provide pretty good value, and for 1.6 million silver each, they're definitely worth it. After that, we have Supreme Utensils, which are 3.2 million silver each, and it's basically the same thing. If you're gonna cook or do alchemy, definitely pick them up, it's gonna be worth it. If you compare it to the advanced utensils, 3.2 million silver for one of these gives you about 5 times the silver value at the very least. So, with all that being said, in the end, there are some pretty nice items being sold. There are definitely some must-buys like the Perfume of Courages, Laila's Petals, and loot scrolls / lifeskill items if you're gonna grind or do life skills. The horse enhancement mats are definitely good if you're leveling a horse. For the stacks, they're okay value but gonna be really up to the player how much they value stacks, as if they're making them themselves, it can be slightly cheaper. The Mythical Censer can be okay if you're impatient, but definitely not a must-buy for people with less silver. Unfortunately, the RNG boxes are all pretty mediocre in this store. If you want a little bit of fun, they can be okay without completely destroying your silver. Overall though, compared to the last Patrigo's Secret Shop event that happened around early June this year, we've seen a decrease in almost every item by around 20%, and even up to 30 to 40% for some items. It is pretty telling that even though we're getting more silver from grind zones, the price of a lot of these old items are becoming lower and lower, like accessories and whatnot. It just shows that people are pushing more for sovereign weapons and deck accessories, which is a pretty interesting trend. But that's basically it for this video. Not a bad little store, and there are definitely some nice items to pick up. Either way though, I hope you all learned something from this video, and I hope to see you all next time.